now live.
Oh,
And Corey can't get in because we're full.
Oh.
I can drop out.
Yeah, I can drop if you want to.
No. It's
no. Yeah, everyone's like, I can go. Tell Corey to take a day. You know, tell him to take a day. We got this.
He's got such good hot takes, though.
He does have great
I
hot
have
takes.
no one else to play off
he
of.
does.
Yeah, what? We're gonna hot take from.
Ralph doesn't
Trust
talk
me.
enough anymore.
Trust me, with this group,
retired.
there will be hot takes.
So did anybody actually play Helldivers 2 this weekend?
What
No.
is that?
I don't even know what that is.
Oh man! So
Wow.
I was talking about it earlier. It's a video game that they expected like 100,000 people to play, and like 700,000 people played, and they didn't have like a queue set up or anything, so no one could get in, and the world was screaming. And then I figured out a way to get past the queue, and it was glorious. So
you're saying you hacked a video game?
I didn't hack it. I just right-clicked and I got in. That's all I'm gonna say. But they fixed everything now. Everything's cool now.
He hit F12 and it got him in.
No.
Then
no one in this room has ever hacked a video game. Never.
No. There was a video game a while ago called it was like Monte Crypto, and me and Bo and Steve played this game, right? And the goal of the game was that you had to solve these like 12 challenges and you could win a full Bitcoin, right? And what happened is that like at first we were like trying to run through the game and stuff and like trying to go through this maze, and it took forever. And then we're like, screw this crap. We got like cheat engine. We're like just hacking the hell out of this game. And the whole thing is that the designer had designed it like that. Like you were going to have to hack it at certain points. So it was really fun.
I am so sorry, but before we start, guys, I want to introduce you to my brother from another mother, Mr. Mike Poor. And when it comes to video game hacking, I think King Guardians has. Mike, do you want to talk about the Wii Match and the Wii Venge video game hacking from years back before we start? Just kind of setting the stage for that. So this is one of my favorites. But go ahead, Mike, if you want to set it up. Go.
So at the time we had the illustrious Josh Wright working for us, and essentially he set up a hack of the Wii tennis racket that essentially would jam all of the channels that the Bluetooth racket would use, because we wouldn't know ahead of time which particular channel it would be on. So this particular hack took him about 6 months to work on and develop. So we were teaching at an Orlando event. They had the Wii set up for students and instructors during the breaks and otherwise, or skip class and play Wii tennis or something. So basically, Josh had set up like, hey, when we're in Orlando, let's have our rematch, because we had a Wii tennis match at a previous Sands conference, and I beat him, of course, due to my extreme athletic prowess. So Josh spent about 6 months working on a hack, and unbeknownst to me, my entire company was in on that. Whenever we'd get on conference calls or whatever, they would sit in and discuss how this hack would work and what they were building. So came time, Orlando, Wednesday after class, showdown, and I walk up, and Josh and his class are all standing there in front of the Wii. And I thought to myself, like, oh, I'm dead now. Josh, he's an amazing, technical hacker, as well as, master of all things RF. So, I knew I was in for some shenanigan. So I walk up and I get handed a racket. So that already to myself set off all my alarm bells. And so I pick up the racket and I look at it. And right when we're about to start, I turned to Josh and said, you don't mind if, I use your racket and you use this one. He's like, oh, no problem. And I thought, Kobayashi Maru, the guy, literally was planning on it from the beginning. So I have this racket. So Josh, or I serve, Josh hits back, and I go to hit back, and the racket doesn't move. It just whiffs. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I serve again. Josh hits back. I hit back, expecting it not to work, and it actually hits the ball. He hits back, and then my racket doesn't work. So we go through this whole thing. He beats me hands down. And he said, well, let me introduce my cohort over here. And his facilitator from the class steps forward. He says, why don't you show what you have in your pocket? So he pulls out this RF Bluetooth jammer that would jam all of those particular channels. And pretty much every time Josh wiped his brow, they would jam my racket so that he could beat me at Wii Tennis, which is awesome. So I was honored. He spent 6 months of time, including, my company time, to use the device to beat me at Wii Tennis.
Man.
All right. And with that, everybody, let's get rolling. Bring out the crooked finger, Ryan.
Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Talking About News. My name is John Strand. In this edition, we're going to be talking about Mr. Cooper having data exposed for over 2 million customers. Now, you may think this is a time machine. We've gone back in time. No. This is a completely different Mr. Cooper breach. We're also going to be talking about Change Healthcare and the cyber attack there. We're going to be talking about ConnectWise ScreenConnect. We're going to be discussing the Chinese doing Chinese hacker type things, the LockBit takedown, and then we'll see where we actually go from there. I am joined this week by a great panel of people that hopefully I can see. We are joined by Mike Poor, who told the We Match Revenge story, which actually is only half of the story. Maybe someday we can get Mike to tell the rest of the story because it gets better, but it's up to Mike. We're also joined by Wade and Wade's fantastic mustache. Wade, it's good to have you back, sir.
It's good to be back, John.
Absolutely. And Mike, who's here almost all the time, as always, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. We have Alex and his very creepy mannequin behind him, as always, again.
Yep.
We got Bronwyn is on. Bronwyn, good to have you back as well. And who else? We got
Pleasure to be here.
the thing. Andrew, you managed to sneak in. Awesome. Thank you for joining. We also have Zach and Hackerman, or also known as Florida Man. And as always, Ryan pulling this whole thing together, making us look good, smell good, and feel good. So let's jump straight into the news stories. I've got to start with this Mr. Cooper story. I'm going to set the stage, and I want to get everyone's kind of hot take on it. Mr. Cooper, a major U.S. mortgage company, left an open Google Cloud instance exposing details of millions of its customers only 2 months after the company suffered a severe data breach. If you remember, they were shut down so hard that people couldn't make their payments online. So it was a fairly big deal. And I almost didn't bring the story up because I thought it was
the same one.
I thought it was the same one. And, when you get hacked, I totally have nothing but love and sympathy in my heart for whenever people get compromised. Whenever something like this, it means that there's some pretty fundamental steps in the incident response process that were probably missed. And I kind of want to get you guys' takes on this. Does anybody have anything to add to this or what your thoughts are, other than, of course, it's bad, real bad. So
It's bad, real bad.
I declined to comment.
Pick it up there.
I mean, this is a pretty
They're
normal
setting
thing.
the bar at a new low.
Yeah. So Andrew, go ahead.
This is a pretty normal thing, right? So I think the thing a lot of people don't understand in Google Cloud versus the other clouds is that you can make literally anything public. It's a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking that if it weren't like just after a data breach, then you might have some case for it's like, yeah, you can make anything public, but like after a data breach, somebody's got to come in and be like, hey, there is like literally a blinking red light over here for this stuff being very, very public. Do we want to take care of that? And
Now I want to ask, so with Amazon, whenever you do that, just kind of leaving this up to the cloud people, it literally is throwing lots of warnings. Does Google have that level of warnings for its customers, or is it kind of like what Amazon was like 5-6 years ago?
So they do if you turn it on.
Yeah.
In AWS now, like AWS is fortunately trended towards not public is the default for all new accounts. Unfortunately, most people don't live in new accounts. For GCP, it's it's wild, wild west times largely.
So, and then the other thing, and Mike, I want to bring you in, by the way, once again, I don't know what's recorded and put out there, but for those of you that are joining us, Mike Poor is on with us. Mike Poor is like a big brother to me in the security industry. But Mike, whenever, you and I have been teaching incident response for a long time, let's just say a long time, greater than a long time. Let's just leave it at that. And one of the things that we always talk about is failure to stop reinfection. And what kind of pushback do you get within Guardians whenever you're doing an incident? And a lot of times we try to tell people, hey, we should do a quick vulnerability analysis, quick, dirty. It's not going to be like we're going to try to just give a company a once over. And we get pushback on that. Do you see that kind of changing with the incidents that you all are working where people are more open to like, yes, let's make sure that we don't have any other doors that are open? Or is there still a lot of pushback for doing vulnerability analysis as part of an incident response gig?
So over the last 2 decades, what I've seen is it kind of trend better and then worse. So 20 years ago, we got called in to do an incident where their online purchasing system had been compromised, and it was feeding a bot into an IRC channel, posting real live, customer credit card information, and everything else. And we went in to contain the breach and help them respond to this. And the first thing was, you have to take the store offline. And they said, no. And we said, okay, well, we're done here. Time to go. And they said, well, what do you mean? You got to help us, deal with the breach. And it's like, well, first you have to contain the bleeding. And they really didn't want to. They said, we're still selling product. And then, I think that, maybe based on the types of customers that we were servicing, for example, as well as the general industry trend, it ramped up dramatically to, we want to know what happened. We want to know what data was accessed, not just to figure out who we have to notify, but literally to be able to stop the breach and stop the bleeding. And then with a lot of the regulation for the need to disclose and so forth, it started to be run by the lawyers. And at that point, I think that it dropped off a little bit. Well, we got increased pushback where, hey, we just want to know, do we have to notify, and how do we move on? So yeah, that's what I've seen over time. And we still get pushback when we want to contain and do additional analysis, look for additional signs of breach or additional points of disclosure.
Absolutely. Mike, I kind of wanted to ask you, whenever you're seeing this type of thing, I mean, you work predominantly in financial, and this is kind of like quasi tangential to that. Like, what do you think is going to be some of the fallout from Mr. Cooper? Is there anything that's going to be a fallout? It's just like they've already dealt with one breach. There's really not going to be anything bad. Ain't nothing going to happen from this. Like, what are your thoughts? And Wade, I want to get your take on this as well, because you both work a lot of incidents. Like having one bad breach that shut them down for weeks to where they couldn't process anything. And then less than 2 months after that, another breach. It seems to me like there should be some like repercussions for this, right?
There should be, but the odds are that there really won't be. I'm actually surprised that they're not turning around and blaming their incident response team for it, saying that
I'm surprised
in the containment process, they opened this up for the external IR team to go ahead and take a look at, and everything forgot to get turned back to the way that it was. That's the most logical thing. They're going to come up with something. My biggest thing is that seeing something like this and the amount of breaches that are happening, I have not seen it directly, but indirectly, something in the back of my mind is starting to itch that the lawyers are starting to force the C-suite to build in the contingency of, we're going to have a breach, especially with how many breaches are out there right now and how frequent we see them. As far as the financials go, as long as there's no fraud that's actually happening, you're not going to see a lot of blowback. It's when the fraud starts hitting on the financial side that you'll start seeing more and more of the blowback on it, at least from my experience.
I think Lucent Shadow hit it on the head, right? They're publicly traded. So with all the new laws about having to actually talk about anytime you got a breach and having, was it the SEC filing, right? That you have to actually say you're breached now. I think that's going to be the new thing, especially with the past couple instances we saw of something very similar to this. The other big thing, right, is just this is like bread and butter for like a couple of the big threat actors out there right now, and I'm not surprised. Otherwise, I can't really talk about this breach that much, and I'll leave it
Okay,
at that.
perfect, fantastic. So Alex, I got a quick question for you. Whenever you see the information based on kind of what you do, like when you start seeing that leaked data is names, customer IDs, loan numbers, enrollment links, email addresses, phone numbers, like once again, as Wade just said, this is kind of bread and butter stuff. Like this is the stuff that you can use, or not, we can use legitimately as part of our security assessments. But what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is we're not going to see a direct one-to-one correlation. Like this breach, you can immediately tie it to another breach because this data can be used in so many different attack vectors, correct?
Yeah, it can be used in a lot of attack vectors. And then importantly, like this also answers the question, because I see this come up a lot where financial institutions are like, well, how are they getting the specifics for our customers? How are they knowing that they need to call this customer as this bank president or as this credit union president? How do they know this stuff? And it's like, well, it's data breaches. Like your customer's data gets breached, and then later on down the line, they go, hey, this is Mr. Cooper reaching out to you about loan with number da 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 da, and we need to correct some items and have that information on hand. But a lot of organizations go, well, are there any of our passwords in this data breach? No. Did we stop the bleed? Sort of. I mean, debatable in this case. And then they move on. They go, okay, the data's out there. We did the incident response. It's cleaned up. Not realizing that this information is going to be used later on to create a mess and fraud and continue to be a fraud problem.
I think one thing to hit on that Alex talked about is the fraud, right? So this is dealing with home loan information, which is big money if you get in the right email address or you sit man in the middle with someone, right? Someone accidentally moving a large sum of money, then there you go. There's a couple $100,000. There's a bunch of good stories about this happening, and becomes very, very hard to get this type of money back. And I would say it's a low investment, high yield type of attack usually with this type of stuff, just because of the sheer amount of money that's coming through all these home loans and the amount of data that was released, right?
Brian, I wanted to bring you in on a question that you and I have talked about in the past.
Yeah.
This isn't like a lot of their customers can just, well, I'm just going to go with somebody else, right? Like sometimes these loans are incredibly difficult to try to shift to somebody outside of like Mr. Cooper. I don't know about you, but I think that there's probably a lot of people that would love to move their loans right now, but it's not that simple. It's a monopoly once you get locked in.
Yeah, it really is. And this is one of the things that I wanted to bring into the conversation too. How many of these organizations really realize that a data breach is a gift that keeps on giving? Just because you get breached today, you've done the incident handling today, great. 3, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, that data can still be inflicting real harm on real people. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it isn't easy to move a mortgage. It isn't easy to move a loan. I mean, heck, look at how hard it is to consolidate student loans.
Yeah. So trying to back out of this is difficult. All right. Any final thoughts on this before we move on to some of the other stories? Because God, there's so many stories this week. It's a little bit insane. So, all right, let's move on. I want to talk about ConnectWise because this happened very, very quickly after our last show. And by the way, I think this is, since we've been doing the show, one of the first perfect 10 CVE scores we've had with.
For now, they're gonna pay for the extra premium to get it.
I don't think so. Actually, it's interesting. So last week this dropped, right? And I just shared the link real quick in the chat. So last week this dropped, and ConnectWise released it, and ConnectWise was like, "This is a 10," and they got out in front of it, and I really felt like ConnectWise did a good job, and I wanted to kind of give some people background on that. I was asked to be part of a webcast for the Cyber Call with Andrew Morgan and kind of moderate a panel discussion with John Hammond and some other people. And the CISO of ConnectWise was on, and there was no requirement. Like I was able to ask whatever I wanted. He came on. He did a very, very good job. He did an excellent job saying, hey, we found this. We're going to make this patch available for people that aren't even paying for a current license of ScreenConnect. Like they did a really, really, really good job. The only question I felt like he kind of danced around a little bit is I asked, what are you doing different between last week and next week. Because right now, this week, you're focusing on this issue, right? You're getting this patch out, you're getting this vulnerability addressed as quickly as you possibly can. You worked and you did things last week, and your life is going to be different next week. How is it going to be different? And he's in the middle of an incident. He's doing press releases. He's going on all kinds of different places to talk about it, to let as many people know about this vulnerability as possible and get a patch out there. But that was kind of the only question I felt like he kind of tap danced around. But this vulnerability, for those of you that don't know, is you literally can access the ScreenConnect setup wizard page, the ASPX page, directly after it's been set up. So you can set up the authentication, set up all of the users, and like configure the entire thing. And then you can force browse right back to the wizard and redo it. Or the other thing that you can do is you can submit requests to this page to add new users and passwords added to this thing, to the ScreenConnect. And the reason why it has a high severity is ScreenConnect is a remote management tool. So you don't just get access to that server, you also have the ability to then gain access to all of the clients that are running the ScreenConnect software. So it was absolutely insane that, two things. One, this is a crazy vulnerability. I know Mike is looking at this and like, isn't this like 1999 type vulnerability, directory traversal? And it's really, really crazy how good I think ConnectWise has gotten it out there, actively trying to advertise this to as many people as they possibly can and get the word out to try to get this stuff, to get this addressed. But I wanted to get you all's take on this one. Like I said, I think that ConnectWise is doing a good job handling it, but there are some serious questions about this SDLC that have to be addressed at that company very quickly.
Honestly, the article they published was great, right? So it allowed for the community to come together and throw out some detections really quick, which I threw into chat, a couple of Sigma alerts. And that's the one thing I care about. If you're going to have this big vulnerability, of course, there's going to be like problems. But if you actually get behind it, give it to the community and tell us exactly what's going on, at least we can build preventions and detections for it.
Well, and that's kind of what Huntress did. John Hammond actually worked, and also Blackpoint Cyber did a really good job working with ConnectWise to get IOCs and get Sigma rules. I think Florian had some out like within a day. And like we're already seeing organizations getting popped with this vulnerability. And the thing that sucks is the vulnerability is trivial to exploit. And there's a patch, it's available. The issue isn't necessarily the vulnerability at this point. It's just there's tons of organizations that just are not part of this echo chamber to know about the vulnerability and get it fixed. And those are the ones that are getting popped right now. So, but yeah, I thought that was great. There was one jackass company. I can't remember the name of the company. Maybe someone can hit it in chat, that they immediately dropped like the exploit, like within a few hours. I think it was like Tower or something.
They had to get the street cred, John. They had to be the first,
right?
Yeah.
I got to verify the detection some way. Okay. I don't know what the
right. There definitely is some POCs out now. Obviously, you said, John, someone had dropped it, and so it's out there now. You know what? I'm going to be surprised though. So remote or was it Desktop Anywhere, or what was the last one that
Dude, it's like one a week now. Right?
Yes. So there's a bunch of these out there. So like a bunch of these products for remote management, and a lot of different companies are using BombGuard as another example. There's many, right? And so don't be surprised. AnyDesk, thank you. Don't be surprised to see this in another product, right? Because they're getting used all over a lot of different enterprises. So
as like a red teamers, what do you guys see mostly people use to like in lieu of in lieu of these tools? What would you recommend using most? Because I know, at least for corporations I've worked at, we just block any of these types of software cannot go outbound. And if we ban them from being downloaded on the network and block them at the firewall, if labeled remote management tool block type of deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've even seen like firewall detection hits for remote management software in general.
Yeah. Someone's getting DOSed right now. But this also
this
also kind of shows, this kind of shows the difference between the MSP space and an MSSP space and like the standard corporate America security space, right? Because if you go to corporate America and you're like, what do you guys use for remote management? A lot of them like look at you funny and they're like, we use remote desktop. I don't know what you're talking about. They're all inside of the network. They're not trying to do management to dozens of companies and
so John,
manage it. Go ahead, Mike.
No, John, I was just going to say, I think that a lot of companies are moving to these RMMs because of work from home and other kinds of more mobile travel for these devices, right? So, you know, and remote desktop just might not be on the host. Maybe they're not on Windows. I mean, there's a lot of other things. But yeah, I mean, I definitely see them being deployed in enterprises, right? Outside of the VPN, right? Just a way for their support desk to get into these systems to access them, right? So
I hate to say it, that's why I see Zero Trust being pushed out a lot, right? As that in lieu of that VPN, in which it's a good reason for it, but I hate every time I see all the software used. Like if you look at any good threat actors nowadays, they're trying to live off the land, right? And as soon as you see one of these, you know you're gonna have to somehow track this remote management software if it's going to be used properly or improperly. I know Nork is another big one. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Wait, and then, this gets into a problem though. ScreenConnect, this was actually used by a bunch of adversaries, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of pen testing firms and actual nation state adversaries are actually using these programs because so many EDRs already have pre-built white listing or allow
they're signed, John,
for them to run. What's that?
I said they're signed. They're signed executables, and they're known to be not necessarily
C2. Thanks a lot.
Exactly, and they're it's funny because I've actually set these things up, and you'll see like some of your EDR products will detect it. They'll be like, "Oh, this is bad," right? But then organizations have to put them in, so it's like this balancing act between legitimate use case and non-legitimate, and then it becomes like, well, just depends on what you do with your mouse and keyboard, right? That's the only difference.
The worst part is you got to play whack-a-mole with it as a defender because there's just so many of them. Hopefully your firewall can signature them. If not, hopefully you notice it.
Before we move off of this too, one of the things I wanted to touch on is that, John, you mentioned that we've got an increase in these RMM attacks. Well, of course we do, because malicious actors are the ultimate fashionistas when it comes to hacking. So if, hey, here's an RMM we can attack, are there any others out there that we can also leverage? So it's blood in the water.
Yeah, we're going to get to China here in a little bit, but kind of feeds on, we're going to talk about LockBit first. But no, absolutely. Like with a lot of these adversaries are going after these products because it's like, why do we rob banks? It's where the money is. Why do we hack our tools? It's because that's where the access is, right?
It's a one-to-many attack.
You take a look at this and you go back. This is not new. Kaseya was hit, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? And they're one of the big RMM providers out there that allow for branding for these MSSPs to go ahead and do it. The question is we can go ahead and control it in the corporate environment. How do we deal with it with the small businesses that are using these MSSPs?
Because they need it.
And then how do we control it, though, from that standpoint? How do we get them to move to something that's not going to be as blatant? I mean,
you just leave RDP open.
It's that whole problem. Leave RDP open to the internet.
Yeah, public on the internet. It's better that way. I'm just kidding.
We're just kidding. Don't listen to Ralph. Yeah, no. Mike, you were going to say something?
Pay no attention to the man.
Well, I was just elaborating on the fact that it's a one-to-many attack, right? So if I find a flaw in an RMM, for example, then I can use it against thousands of corporations and thousands of users. So it's a good return on investment.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I want to talk about the LockBit takedown. So, Ralph, do you want to set this one up? We were kind of talking about it in the continuous pen testing meeting. So basically, LockBit got taken down. I think there was a PHP vulnerability that LockBit actually gave a walkthrough of how they were actually compromised. But do you want to kind of talk about this one a little?
Yeah, so I mean, they got their infrastructure, got seized, and then they, what do you call it? They got attacked via a PHP vulnerability, and then they posted about their attack in that in like the whole write-up, right? So like the agencies were utilizing this vulnerability to take down their infrastructure, right? So it's it's an interesting
They're already
write-up.
back up. That's one thing to hit though.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like whack-a-mole, right? Like,
and that gets into like how, you know, we celebrate these, right? Like people are talking about, you know, so they brought down, like they say they brought down Black Cat. They brought down a server from Black Cat. This one, they're coming back up already. And this makes big news and everyone's like, oh, they brought it down, and they just move on. And I don't know if this is as much of a victory as people try to make it sound like it is. I don't know. Am I being too cynical on this? It seems like they brought down like a C2 server and a couple of things.
Well, they got to the remote management. They have pictures of like the back end, right? So then I guess it's another one-to-many attack. They could have, they probably could have done some stuff from there. But once again, like these threat actors don't have to do IR. They don't have to have continuity. They just say, all right, burn it all down. We'll build another one over here. We don't really care that much. They do have some good customer service, yes, but at the end of the day, they're just there to make the money, which is...
So White Cyberduck said it. White Cyberduck said two things. One, can I get permission to hack RMM tools? Not yet, White Cyberduck. No, you do not have permission. And then I think this is a great victory. It's scary if you're hiding from the feds to get hacked. And I can kind of see that, right? I don't know how much fear these organizations are in whenever these servers get compromised. I kind of lean to not much, but something, right? You've got to have something associated with it.
Well, which organizations are you talking about having fear, John? Because there's
Alex,
going to be...
I think that what he's trying to say is like the bad organizations have some fear. And I was going to say some of the good organizations, the ones that got compromised, now have this fear for the, it's like, well, did you say you restored services without paying, but alas, the server details show that is not correct. Or you said that you did the negotiations and your information is secure. You took the necessary measures to secure the data, and this batch of server information shows that is not correct. So you told the regulators, a publicly traded company, and you said nothing, and you're showing up on this as well.
There you go. So that's where I'm like, it's the good companies that might be scared too.
Do you think we're going to see more hackback from the feds? Or from other governments?
The feds have been doing this a long time, all the way back to the Wallodec botnet. Usually what they do is they work with the U.S. Marshals to enforce an ex parte injunction against these organizations. An ex parte injunction just means that the party that the injunction is against is not expected to show up in court and like fight it. But usually it's in conjunction with the Marshals, Microsoft, a bunch of different organizations to basically degrade these botnets. And we've been doing it. It's been done for a long, long, long time. And Mike, you've actually been part of these. I mean, you've been doing this for a long, long, long time. You've been part of these shutdowns. There's a lot of red tape that you got to go through before these shutdowns occur. It's not like, it's just like, let's bring down a botnet. Usually you got to get approvals from all kinds of different people before you actually make like the actual change that shuts it down with the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, Secret Service gets involved. And everybody's got to sign off on it in like the highest levels. It's kind of annoying. And
look at all the logos on that picture, right? Like,
given all of the hoops that have to be jumped through, it's a miracle that any of these takedowns ever happen. And also getting back to your point about the aggressors, do they have any fear? Well, of course not. They're mostly in countries where they can't be extradited. So. True. Yeah, it's
Russia.
If we have if we have any of these things happen, it's a great PR stunt. It probably does provide a little bit of relief to victims of these attacks, while the bad guys spin up a new instance or farm.
If you did save the lockdowns data, right? Whatever data was ransomed, because now they have the code. So you could theoretically go unencrypt your information now. The other one I kind of want to know is if for the companies that did pay them to get rid of the data for any type of blackmailing type stuff, can we go look to see if they actually did get rid of it? Can we get a little bit right? Like that would be kind of cool.
The spoiler is that like they didn't get rid of anything.
They sold it off to someone else.
Their data retention policy is keep everything.
Yeah, dude, they have this van. It said free candy spray painted on the side. They seem totally legit. We could trust them.
Free credit cards.
I think a couple of things that we've seen kind of across the spectrum of articles that we're discussing today, though, right? So you have, ConnectWise they're setting themselves apart because they're handling the situation pretty well. You've got LockBit essentially handling their takedown pretty well. You know, they're announcing things, they're describing the attack as it happened, and they're back up and running. We're open for business. So it's kind of one of those things that this is becoming the new norm. Is just, yep, this happens. You know, every company gets hacked. Every company gets ransomware installed on their systems. Every company gets shut down and comes back online. So I just wonder if it's becoming the new norm.
Dude, I've got okay, so that's going to lead right into another story. U.S. health tech giant challenge healthcare hit by cyber attack. And this in and of itself does not interest me, but it's based right on what you just talked about, Mike. Down here at the bottom of it, it says something to the effect of it was a nation state adversary that launched
super advanced.
Right, super advanced nation state adversary that did the attack. And that Mike, kind of building on what you've talked about, it's easy now to say, well, we got hacked by a nation state adversary. And, you know, you've been doing this a long time. You know what nation state adversaries look like. And there's some of these breaches that are like, no, this is not secret sauce. This is not like super cutting edge attack. It just becomes that boogeyman that you can just throw this at your investors. You can throw this at the SEC, and you could say a sophisticated nation state attacker. And no one's really going to fight you on that. And it makes it easy.
The insurance companies will.
Go ahead, Bronwyn.
The insurance companies will. How many insurance companies are saying, "Oh, it was a nation state attack. We don't cover that."
Now that's only happened in a handful of situations, like Mondelez. But remember, with the Mondelez, it wasn't the nation state attacker that caused it. It's the fact that the exploit was released as part of shadow brokers. That it was a nation state level exploit that was used. That's why they didn't pay out in the Mondelez thing. And I think that eventually got rectified. The Mondelez did get paid. I can't remember 110%. But you're right. Insurance companies are definitely trending that way. But what we're seeing a lot of trends too is they're just not even covering for cyber liabilities anymore.
So John, you want to call out?
It's like getting earthquake insurance.
It is like getting, or hurricane insurance in Florida at the moment. Go ahead, Hacker Man.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you want to call out what this attack was? We have very small amounts of details right now. So what's your guess, right? Let's, put the guesses out there. Do you think it's ransomware? Do you think it's something else?
It's ransomware that only hit their payment systems, so they can't get paid. So they shut everything down. And that's why.
I'm not going to bet against Wade on this one.
But I think it'll be funny if it is ransomware, because they're going to be like, it was super sophisticated, only the best, and it was like LockBit.
Well, it was LockBit, and then they lost the keys because LockBit got kicked down.
Super nation state attack, and here's what they did: it's this lead attack called directory traversal attack, and brand new. We just started seeing it in 1999 against Microsoft. And that Cam Bush brought up a great point.
You had password?
Yeah. Cam Bush brought up a great point. Colonial Pipeline style shutdown. Remember and that's kind of what Wade was talking about. When Colonial knew that they were compromised, they shut down everything out of an abundance of extreme caution, right? Which I kind of agree with that. Since I was kind of involved in that incident. But it could very well be like that. It absolutely could have been just shut down everything out of an abundance of caution. And that kind of goes against what Mike was talking about, like what we were dealing with 15 years ago, right, Mike? Where they're like, we're going to keep going in the middle of an incident. And we're, used to saying,
John, usually when everything shuts down, that's ransomware. All right. Like it's like
I disagree. Once again, like there's been a number of organizations, once they do get hit, they do shut down everything now. And that's very different from what it was.
Hold on. All right. I'll give you the most recent one that I can think of, right? Was the Vegas one, right? We were like totally ransomware. And they were like, it was ransomware, but we shut things down.
Yeah. Now I'm going to agree with you. The majority of the time, it probably is ransomware.
Yeah,
that's probably
John. And not to say that you're wrong, that people may not react that way. I'm just saying that usually when we have service disruptions, it's usually an indicator of ransomware.
People want
don't we have?
Oh, go ahead.
Don't we have DHS essentially guidelines that basically say that if you were attacked with ransomware, or if you were attacked by a nation state, but you were using this approved DHS software, to protect yourself, you're not going to be found negligent.
I don't know how far that goes, though, to like some of these third-party private companies, right?
Sure.
And I don't know. I kind of cut out the NIST regulations, the new framework stuff that NIST had, but kind of with a lot of that stuff, whether it's DHS or CISA, it's up until, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, where we were wondering, Jesus, did CISA actually shut down a government agency? Or not an agency? They shut down a VPN software, and they did shut down some agencies because of that. It kind of gets into the question of, are we starting to see DHS and CISA starting to flex their might a little bit, or is it just in government agencies? And
well, this had come out right before. This came out right before the Sony hack, the last Sony hack, and so this has been a while. But the deal was, oh well, you're using Mandiant to protect yourself, so therefore you're not negligent because this was a nation state attack.
Yeah, I don't think that it's gone. I haven't heard much of that since then. Right? I just don't know. So
are we gonna get another like hour-long rant about the new NIST?
No,
it's pretty good.
I promise. I'm not.
That was a good video.
All the rants you got.
All right. But I do want to get into something that's ranty, though. The next story I want to talk about is, we talk so much about ransomware and all of this stuff, and we brought it up on this show, and I've talked with a number of you personally. When we see the ransomware attacks, that's not the stuff that really scares me all that much, right? The stuff that absolutely terrifies me are the attackers that sit and dwell for extended periods of time. So Chinese hacking groups just recently had their shadow broker or their vault type breach. And basically, it's a whole bunch of documentation about cyber espionage operations in China. I can't remember the name of the company that the documents actually came from, but there are some really terrifying quotes in here. One of the quotes that came back is Christopher Wray said, China had stolen more of our personal and corporate data than every nation, big or small, combined. And that's scary. But the scariest quote that I got from this, and talking with a lot of FBI agents over the past few years, and also people in the Air Force and other DoD organizations, it said if each one of the FBI cyber agents and intelligence analysts focused exclusively on the China threat, the Chinese hackers would still outnumber cyber FBI personnel by at least 50 to 1. And, we
That's
talk about
insane.
ransomware, we talk about, it is insane, right? And some of us, we've been talking about this for decades, right? Like, this isn't about the noisy attack. This isn't about the ransomware where they shut you down. We're talking about adversaries that want to dwell, maintain access so they can use it for strategic and tactical advantage at some point further on down the line, or steal intellectual property. This is the stuff, like if you're watching the magic trick, the ransomware and all of that is the hands of the magician, the bright, shiny thing the magician is showing you. The actual trick is in the other hand. And I don't think that this gets enough buzz in the industry. This should be the stuff that we are trying to gear our defenses against, not necessarily the standard ransomware that's out there. So I wanted to get you all's take on this, but this article I think scared me more than any of the articles we had this week.
I think this is classic China, right? Like most US-based companies or just the US-based people in general look at the current news and look just a couple months, a couple years ahead, where of course China is epically known to play the long game, and they've been doing it for ever now, and they're doing freaking great. And this is just that. It's really hard for US, at least from what I've seen, to really understand that and to try to go with it. But then again, like, how do we fight 50 to 1? Like, I'm like 25 at the minimum, but I cannot fight 50. Like, it's just pure manpower. It's brute force at the end of the day. Like,
or quality versus quantity. I mean, it's just you have that ratio of 50 to 1. Like, are all hackers created equal? Like, is one FBI intelligence analyst equal to 20 or 30 Chinese hackers? There's
no,
not really having that equivalency there.
And let's be honest,
1-to-1 at all.
Yeah, quantity has a quality all of its own, right? As a quote that was attributed to Stalin, whether or not he said it or not was a completely different thing.
I think
You're also looking at a situation with China, especially, where the government itself is taking in anybody that seems to have any sort of aptitude on it. So they've got the next one up. It's not the US or a lot of Western democracies where it's come work for us, help us be secure. This is your job. This is what you're going to do for X amount of time until we say that you're done doing this. And then you can go into private, and then you're still going to go ahead and work for us. It's a different mindset. In China's mindset overall, I mean, you take a look, in the US, we play chess. In China, they play Go. Completely different games, completely different sorts of strategies. And China has that built into their DNA at this point.
And in China, the other thing to remember is they have 3 tiers of hackers, right? So tier 1 would be hackers that are specifically, their whole mission objective is to hack Chinese citizens, gain access to Chinese organizations, uncovering and hunting down Chinese dissidents. And they have carte blanche to be able to do that against their citizens in a way that no other country, well, maybe Singapore and a handful of others in Russia, that they can do that. If you're good at that, you move up to the second tier. And the second tier is attacking other countries' corporations and their infrastructure, right? The third tier are the people that have proven themselves for the first 2 tiers that literally are hacking defense industrial base complexes on foreign adversaries. So whenever they're training, whenever they're practicing, they aren't going to classes and learning. They're doing the training live against their own IP address space, against their own citizens. They prove themselves as a meritocracy to move up to the second tier. They prove themselves as a meritocracy to move up to the third tier. And then, just as Mike was saying, a huge amount of what happens in China are companies that are doing business in China that literally have direct connections. They have a whole bunch of Chinese developers. They have a whole bunch of like straight VPNs between the 2 companies. And their citizens are part of that intelligence apparatus. And it's not like they're spies. They're just literally told, hey, go get this thing. And they do it. Their apparatus is also students in the United States that are getting internships within the United States. And I don't want this to be like, hey, freak out against everybody that's Chinese, even though it does kind of sound like that. But you have to understand that that's how this system is structured. And we don't have a system like that at all. Yeah, Bronwyn.
One of the things to build on what Wade was saying is that they're playing a long game. They're playing a very long game. And Go, beautiful assessment in terms of the differences, in terms of the mindset. Ultimately, the difference in the number of hackers and the quality of hackers between the United States and other nations comes down to the dedication of will. And our politicians have exactly one thing on their mind at all times, and that's re-election. And so they don't have this long game mentality where they're looking 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And until we're able to develop that in critical portions of our community, we're never going to catch up.
And Andrew, I wanted to pull you into this. Andrew, one of the things that I'm very curious about is whenever we're learning security, whenever we're learning pen testing, whenever we're learning like red teaming and cloud infrastructures, like we're teaching people how to do security assessments for Google Cloud Compute and Amazon and Office 365 and Azure and all these things. Do you see like in the cloud space that like places like Russia and China, are they using that same cloud infrastructure, or do they have their own types of cloud infrastructures that they're using? Like maybe, from like Baidu, or was that Amazon competitor? I can't remember, completely brain farted, online shopping that they have. Yep.
There's a lot of them out there. Alibaba, I think it's the
Alibaba would be the big one. That's the one that I was brain farted.
The code is suspiciously similar to AWS.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge what Bronwyn said for a minute about U.S. politicians and their tenures, because that blew my mind for just like a minute. But yeah, it's really hard to kind of teach things in some of the other jurisdictions, because we have ITAR compliance and we have all these things that kind of prevent us from teaching cloud skills in other countries that aren't friendly with the U.S. And we have actually run into that in the class that I teach. But in general, I think that there is like a very thirsty knowledge base out there that wants to really learn cloud and cloud stuff. I just don't know how much accessibility there is in other countries beyond like US and EU.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things I was going with.
Do you think the quality of our tech, because a lot of our cybersecurity quality, right, can't be exported. It can't be taught. I have talked to individuals in China who do cyber defense, and they don't get these flashy, cool tools that we all have, right? Does that make the difference of that 1 to 50? Which, like these fancy EDRs, these SEMs, anything that theoretically can't be taught or can't be legally in these countries?
I mean, it could. If you look at AWS, China is a region, FedRAMP is a region, and the China region is treated in the same way as AWS kind of treats FedRAMP, which is that features roll out there at a glacial pace. So they actually get technology behind the rest of the world. So they're learning things that are maybe, or it's a subset really of things that they actually can learn and experiment with, unless they're kind of VPNing back to the US and then learning those things and then applying the subset of products that they can learn in their effectively private cloud, because it is a region with things that are feature flagged off.
And if people want to get an idea, I can't remember the gentleman's last name, but Jeremiah keynoted Way West Hacking Fest in San Diego a couple of years ago. And he was in Ukraine, married to a Ukrainian lady, had kids in Ukraine. And when the war started, he actually was actively working with groups to do like what is exposed and using Russia as an example. Point is, the Russian infrastructure was nowhere near as secure as what we see in the United States. I'm also hearing things very, very similar out of China. China is difficult, though. Jeremiah Fowler, thank you very much. And there's the YouTube video for it as well. But China, from what I've heard from people that may or may not be doing scanning behind the Great Firewall of China, it looks very, very different on the inside versus the outside. And on the inside, from what I've heard, is that they are very much wide open. They don't have really good security practices at all. But then again, also in the United States, we have lots of things that are wide open out there as well. But Mike, I want to throw a quote over that, this concerns me because there's a quote, I can't remember who said it. I'm hoping you remember who said it a long time ago. The quote was, what if the cyber war already happened and we lost? I think it was Hillary that said that, but I'm not entirely certain. But this has been something that we've been talking about, like, since I've known you, and we had dinner like 17 years ago in San Diego. This was a topic of conversation, the exact same effing thing. China, a lot more attackers than we have here. Do you think that that's the same narrative, or do you think it's actually gotten to the point of it's come to a head, and this is much worse than it was 17 years ago? Uh-oh, you're on mute, dude. Mike, you're on mute.
How did that happen? Amazing.
No
I think that it's much, much worse. We had when we had the multiple Chinese-based attacks against U.S. federal agencies and ID brokers and so forth. There's a lot of pushback. And what we saw, at least even on the private sector, was the Chinese divesting themselves of a lot of access. So all of a sudden, we had systems that we verified that 2-3 weeks before had been used by Chinese hackers that were now being used by kind of Eastern European criminal gangs and so forth, and that made no sense. So I think that, the Chinese never stopped, but they got a lot more sophisticated and got a lot more controlled in their abuse of their external or foreign resources.
And also for a while during the Obama administration, remember they stopped attacking directly, but they went through proxies where they started hiring different third-party kind of mercenary organizations to do the attacks for them. So they like, I think Bronwyn was the one, like they're playing the game in a different way than the way that we look at it. So any other final things on this before we wrap it up, folks? Wade, you threw out there. It's time to learn Mandarin.
Yeah, right. I tried to Russian. That was so hard. Oh, I don't want.
I want to be taken over by a country whose language I can learn easily.
Right. If you're going to, might as well.
Easier. No,
I'll welcome our Australian overlords instantly.
There we go, Australia. That'd be an easy one. I don't want anybody.
Just don't make me drink Foster's.
Yeah, I don't want to have a book that's like this thick, that's like verb conjugations. Like that's just has 4 or 5 different variations of ma that can mean everything from a mother to milk to whatever. I don't want to.
Did you want to end on a good note at least?
Let's end on a good note, Wade. What do you got?
I want to throw out there the M&M story. I know Alex pitched it, right? It should be like the last one. Pretty much, I believe this vending machine was in Europe or was in the UK, right? And it had an error on it talking about the facial recognition software is currently broken.
How is this a vending news story?
Why does a vending machine have facial recognition software? That's what we need to know.
So I'm going. It's on demographics. Like when they say like even in because I looked at like the website for Invenda, and they have like you can manage pricing remotely. Think about that. So you go
manage pricing so you have based on demographics. Is that what they're doing?
You could. You can. They're trying to get like the demographics data. So let's say you have somebody like Dave Kennedy is walking up to the machine. They know they're not going to sell Dave Kennedy a candy bar unless it's at a good price, and they don't display the prices until you press the button. However, if somebody walks up, Dave? If somebody walks up,
I don't know. He's got big wallet energy right there.
And he might, but if it sees somebody that walks up that looks like they believe that candy bars is one of the 4 basic food groups, they're like, great, this guy's already got his money in the machine. He's going to select this thing, and we're going to add 50 cents to it. Because how do you know? You go, okay, well, that seems too much. Let's go check another one. Okay, it can adjust there. So and when it says like, in the story, it says, it doesn't get an individual person can't be identified, but it can absolutely do the demographics going, okay, so, all these college women coming from their yoga class, what do they want to get? What is the price point that they're going to go for? How much are they willing to spend on candy after a workout?
What's the policy of them being able to take my demographic without me accepting it, or does me buying the M&Ms accept that they can use my demographic, or at least
it may probably have those blurry areas where because it's so like broad demographics that it's not you.
It's only in public areas.
It is the person with a certain figure, certain facial features there, that mustache. How much are they going to play for?
He's got a mustache. He likes peanut M&Ms.
This is why I love.
They probably have super. They probably have super fine print. Some machine that says, "By pressing this button, you consent." Oh God.
But this is why we need hackers, right? This is why, like, I look at hackers as almost like a check on these things, and it pisses me off. The pendulum goes back and forth. We talk about it between defenders and attackers and things like that. And quick rant. We need more hackers to tear things like this apart and get underneath the hood and figure out what it is actually capturing, what it is actually collecting about us, how it is being transferred, because we need to keep some of these technology companies honest in some ways. And I feel like there's too many of these different cloud things, and we don't have enough people with the skills to take this stuff apart, whether it's hacking a Wii controller or hacking a vending machine or hacking APIs for cloud infrastructure. We need more hackers in the world to kind of uncover what's actually being done by these things. And you may think, well, if I hack, I'm going to get in trouble. No, remember, the Department of Justice, if you're a good faith security researcher and you're releasing that information to make the world a safer, better place, and that is your primary goal, they're more than likely not going to press charges against you. More than likely.
Depending on the state.
With that, with that, thank you so much for everyone for joining this week. Let's bring out the crooked finger, and we'll see you next week on the news. Bye, everybody.